Hi guys, Sandy here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about soutache. So I am working on this Julio Cesar's jacket, and you can see here they have black ribbon running down there. What they actually used is a heavy yarn, and I wanted this jacket to look high-end. And I didn't want to buy a whole spool of really nice yarn, which could be $35 or $40 just for that little bit. So what I did was I took some bias strips from a wool crepe. See how it's all crepey. And I cut it at a 45-degree angle so it's stretchy, which means I can move it around without getting lumps and bumps in it. And then I serged it. You could stitch it. I serged it wrong sides together. Just serged it wrong sides together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand sew it onto the top of this jacket. Now the pattern piece has some markings for where this ribbon should go, but because this is so bright against this darker jacket, I made it a little bit longer. They aren't as compact as what the pattern calls for, but I put pins in so I would know when to turn. All right, and then it's going to come down here, then it's going to turn back up again, and it's going to come down here. So I could visually see how it was going to look when the jacket was completed. All right, now, so what I want to do is I'm going to stitch it down. I've pinned it, and I'm going to hand stitch it on this side. So I've worked the serging part and folded it down underneath so you don't see it. And then I'm stitching down one side. I'm going to stitch all the way down one side with the zigzags. Then I'm going to come back and I'm pinning it down. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to stitch this side down all the way. So then it will be on top of my jacket. Now, again, the pattern called for yarn and a couching stitch, which is a sort of like a big zigzag on the machine to go over it back and forth. And I machine stitched down this leather piece. Let's see if I can get a better photo of it. Yep. So I machine stitched down this faux leather piece, which is stretchy, and that's going all the way down. But it's a little wider and it's a little more forgiving. And I'm afraid if I stitch the soutache down, because it's so much narrower, that I am going to get a very messy look. So that's why I'm doing it by hand. But one of the things about cutting this on the bias is see how stretchy that is? So it gets to move. And what you want to do is you want to take this ruler, or any ruler, that has a 45-degree angle on it. All right? And you're going to put this on the edge of your fabric. So say this was your fabric, and I'm putting it on the straight line here. Then I'm going to take this line that says 45 degrees and I'm going to lay it on the edge. And when I cut this, that gives me a 45-degree angle. And what that is, it gives me a true bias on the fabric. And you can cut these strips, and now you have something that has some stretch to it. And even when you sew it in half, and that's one of the best parts about a serger is when you sew it, the serging has flexibility that you don't get with a regular stitch. So you can stitch it with a zigzag. That will give you some flexibility. You can also stitch it with a regular stitch. It will be fine. And then just finish the edges, but it won't be quite as flexible as a serger. But it certainly works. I mean, I've sewed for years and years without having a serger, and we always used bias strips to finish seams. Bias strips are very useful because you can use them to finish arms and collars and neck edges and trim, and there's all kinds of opportunities to use something that has some stretch in it. So the stretch helps it go around the curve, which is exactly what you need when you're doing this kind of fussy work, right? So I'm going to finish up one side, and then we'll come back and we will visit going up the other end. So I want this line to be straight, going down to the next pin. And this is thick at this point. Now I have this felted wool and I have several layers of fabric on there, but I don't want the line to be crooked, this zigzag line, I do want it to be straight. So I'm going to pin it. You know, if it was curvy, you could freehand it and then it would be fine. You would have a very fun and interesting look. But since it is a zigzag, you really want those lines straight. And it's definitely fiddly. Because you need to get the seam underneath. I mean, the other alternative is to sew it right sides together and then turn it inside out, but for me that just seemed like too much work for this project. So now you can see I've pinned it down, and now I'm just going to go and stitch it. Okay, I have finished hand stitching down one side of this piece here, and I'm ready to turn the corner because I want my soutache to come back up. And what I want to do, I'm hoping you can see this. I don't know if I can do it right underneath here. Let's try this. So, see how it's rounded? I need to stuff the serging underneath, and in the process, and it gets very fiddly, in the process, we want to turn the corner. So in order to turn the corner, there's an overlap. Can you see how this piece comes down and then this piece is going to overlap on top of it? And it's a mitered corner without really being a mitered corner. And then we're going to go around that corner and come back. When we're stitching on the inside of the corner, we'll do a couple of stitches just to hold it down, because you're going to, so this one's finished on one side, and you can see that there's an opening here where it's been mitered. This piece came down and then this piece folded and came back around. So you can actually see a line where this piece is now continuing on this way. And for this type of application, if you were going to do a quilt or something that had, you needed really sharp lines, you would do this better. For this type of application, that's fine. All right, as you can see, we finished all of our soutache or bias decoration. We started sewed all the way down one side, zipped right back up the other side, because once the first side is done, that's very fiddly. That's the one that's problematic. I want to talk about a couple of things. This is purple on black, so there isn't a very high contrast, and you want to have a thread that matches really well, because that's going to help hide your stitches. No one's going to be hanging off of this. There isn't going to be any stress on it. So you really just need to kind of really quickly stitch it down. But if the thread matches your bias trim, whatever you're putting on for trim, that is the best way to go. Now, if I was putting this purple on something white, I would have to be really much more careful with my stitches. But since it's going on this very muted background, you can't see them. I mean, you would have to look really hard to see the stitches, and if you got that up that close to my jacket, I probably would feel a little weird. Anyway, so I like the design. I'm really happy with the way that the design came out. It adds just a little bit of color, and this jacket, this is actually the fabric of the rest of the jacket, so it's pretty wild. The other side of the front, the back, the sleeves, and the collar are all this side, which is the right side of the wool. For this piece, I used the back side, which looks like this, and then there's some leather, faux leather trim on it, and then on top of that is a zebra sheer that's been quilted down, so you can see on the back it's been quilted approximately every ½ inch, and then cut down the center. So this is all going to get kind of frayed and ravelly, and then I stitched down this faux leather. So that's been stitched down on the machine. You can see that. And then obviously this one we just did by hand. So this is the front of the jacket, and the rest of the jacket's going to be pretty plain, although it's going to be made out of this like crazy wild fabric. I liked the purple because it gave it a little bit of oomph. Now you can do this kind of bias work on anything and it would be beautiful. It would be beautiful on the hem of a skirt, going down the front of a blouse. There's lots of really good options, and once you get this technique down, now remember, this is an art piece. I am going to Vail in a couple of weeks and I want to wear this. It looks high-end, it looks expensive. It took quite a bit of time to do this one side, but the rest of the jacket is going to go up lickety-split. Now this probably, to sew this down and make this, probably took me 2 hours because I wanted to get it right, and I'm very happy with it. But is it worth it? Sure. I mean, what a difference that just that little pump, you know, little bit of brightness to it, although it's not in your face, but it's enough to kind of dry your eye. And also it's linear, so that's helpful when you're short and you're not a size 2. I want to talk to you about, we talked about these little mitered corners. You can see that one now much better now that it's pinned down. This piece came in, this piece got folded around, and in the process everything else got tucked in underneath. And so we did a couple of stitches here and then a couple of stitches right in the center. Again, unless somebody's really picking at that, it's not going to go anywhere. These pieces aren't quite as easy. They're just kind of rounded and I just push them down. But you know what? No one's going to be looking that closely. So I want you to think about this. This is supposed to be an expression of the way you feel about your clothes. This adds some real art dimension to it. And also, it's a statement. It makes a statement about your personality. So you should enjoy the process. Try some bias tape. I think homemade bias tape, you will be very happy with the results. Keep in mind that the heavier the tape, the thicker it's going to be. So this happens to be a wool crepe. So I'm not sure how you can see that it's actually off of the jacket. I mean, there's a lot of fabric there. You could make it so it's use lightweight cotton, and if you made a tube and turned it, and there's a lot of other ways to do it. You make it very, very flat. This, I wanted some depth to it, so I'm pretty happy with it. So I hope you try using bias binding to add decoration and trim to your projects, and stay tuned. You will see the link for the completed jacket on here, and I'm looking forward to seeing it done myself. So until next time, happy sewing. Bye.